Hey gang, Eric Whitacre here. I am playing my brand new sample library with Spitfire, Contrast. That sound that you just heard there was from the synth engine, and I'll talk about that later on as we go through this walkthrough. The synth engine is super cool. I'm very excited by it, and especially because we've got some guest collaborators who have made presets that are just to die for. The Contrast library is the follow-up to Choir, and I'm incredibly proud of what that library was and the way that it's been used. And with this one, we've used the same incredible singers, same studio, Air Studios. You already hear it, the same beautiful tone quality of singing and sampling. And what we want to do with Contrast is take all of that, all of those essential qualities, and then push it even further. What could we do with the human voice? So the lightest lights, these ethereal, ephemeral sounds, these dark, brooding sounds, and trying to find something that at the same time was human and emotional, but then alien and strange. All these experimental techniques and things that I use in my writing, but things that I never used in my writing. So ways of using the voice that maybe you haven't thought of before. Certainly I hadn't thought of before we were in the studio. And I think what it creates is this emotional palette, this cinematic emotional palette that is kind of different than anything we've done before. Let's take a walk through, shall we? All right, so as we begin here, we're on the standard view, which anybody who's used Spitfire sample libraries before will be very familiar with. This actually looks quite a bit like Choir, except you can see that the feel, the look and feel has changed for Contrast. I love how beautiful the UI is. And down here, basically, you can see that it's divided into light sounds and dark sounds. And one of the beautiful things that you can do with voices that is hard to do with almost every other acoustic instrument is you can brighten or darken based simply on the sound, the mouth shape, in this case, the vowel. So for instance, the light, let's say we take something like this. So you hear how light and shiny and bright that is, and then all you do is just darken it with changing the vowel. I love that it's so simple to work through these. Even on this standard view and with this first sample, you've got all of these different intervals that you can play. So for instance, you hear that it's a perfect fourth, right? Now these were very intentionally chosen. You've got minor seconds, for instance, and here, perfect fifth. And the reason for doing this is that because then these are easy to stack into super interesting chords. So even if you take a fifth, hear how rich and deeply textured that is? And then if you take something a little more complex, what I love about that is just so simply at the touch of a button, suddenly you can create these genuinely interesting emotional worlds. I know this standard view already, before we even get into the very dissonant sounds, is something that I'll go back to over and over and over. I also have to say, as the conductor of the Eric Whitacre Singers, it is beyond surreal to have what I consider some of the best voices in the world. They're there in the box. Like I can actually see their faces when I listen to this. I know each of those individual voices. Actually, it makes me a little emotional. All right, so then let's immediately jump to something a little more interesting, a little more experimental. So we go here to the Divergences, the Convergences, and already you can hear. So you hear those minor seconds, those grinds against each other. Again, I feel with voices, there's nothing like the sound of those voices together in those dissonances. It creates a feeling inside. And if we create a denser cluster, I find that beautiful and haunting. And the way I might use something like that is probably darker and then lower. So say down in the basses and tenors. Oh, it sounds so smoky and mysterious. And what I love is that even just a single pitch is incredibly useful sounds, I think. And again, separated here with the light sounds, the light versions of these. So you hear in this one, it's brighter, of course, because of the light, but then also the voices converge together. So if you take a full chord, a dissonant one, ooh, I love that. And what I love about that, especially, is that is so hard to do live with the real choir, and here with the sample library, ba-boom. And again, you can do that with darker tones. I can think of so many interesting applications for this sample alone. Back in the 2D section, all light, for instance, you've got these gorgeous sounds here that we've called shards. The idea there, you can hear that they're individual voices and they're all holding the same pitch, and then out of the texture, soloists are sort of popping out, and these are really nice when used as a chord or a cluster. It just has its own life, and there's a sound here called crystals. Again, what we had the singers do is they're all holding the same pitch and then individually at their own pace saying ta, 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 ta on pitch. So you get this beautiful randomized texture happening. As with every sample in the library, you've got such control over, say, for instance, the mic placement, the big mics, and sort of getting the whole room. You can go medium, you can go small, you can go close. And then, this is new to this library, you can even choose, for instance, okay, let's take the soprano mic only. So now, you're getting a close-up of just the sopranos, even within that cluster. Here, the basses and tenors sound distant because we're only hearing the soprano mic at that moment. So you have such control over the mic placement. And then even within the sample itself, we go back to the light shards, right? And then what we can do is come over here to the mic trees. Let's turn off that big mic. Take the reverb down here so that it's nice and dry. We're gonna bring up that super close mic here. You can really hear the individual voices, and it's so dry, so close. So you have such options just here in the box over the size of the room, the amount of reverb, and most importantly, just how close you want those mics to the voices themselves. Of course, the entire library is split up by voice type as well: soprano, alto, tenor, and bass. I've been playing tutti, so the choir together. But if we go here, go for instance to sopranos. And here's something super cool. So these light fragments, if you play the key soft, down a minor third. If you play it hard, it's up a minor third, right? So you can, and just a little harder, you get that second. It's incredibly powerful. So you can actually create these melodies or these grooves just by using velocity. And you can be very specific. You can either play it, perform it like this, or sequence it in, and then just alter the velocity a little bit so that you get all sorts of different colors, different leaps, that the sopranos or the altos or the tenors or the basses, whichever you choose, they'll leap whichever way you'd like them to. Sometimes I sit down at the keyboard or I'm in my head and I'm out of ideas. And if I start playing, Hear how the color changes? And then suddenly I have an idea I hadn't thought of that. And now I'm sort of dancing with the sample library, that it's giving me ideas as I'm composing. That is worth its weight in gold. Going on from inspiration, the idea is that sometimes you're just looking for something. Uh, Somebody once asked me, like, what do you do about writer's block? And I said, I don't think there's a difference between composing and writer's block. It's just endless block after block after block after block. And what I'm always looking for is just like fluid. How do I navigate around those blocks? The best way I've found is to do this, which is, as I said before, dance with the sample library. And here in Evo View, what you've got is you've got these evolutions, right? That they're almost these tiny little performances. And in the studio, we did these very intentionally to think, okay, how could we use these chunks of ideas later on as inspirational tools? It's so haunting. And as a composer, it's so nice to be out of my head and just hearing it, getting the feedback and being inspired by what I'm hearing and thinking, that I can use. That's a little brick from this other world that I can pull through the window and then start to build with. And the nice thing is, it's not only here in Evo View, but if you go back to the standard view and then you come all the way down, you can also access all Evos here. And then this just gives you a kind of more focused version of that. And again, light and dark, these clouds. Hear how subtle that is, how they barely move. You hear them breathing. So for instance, I absolutely love the Evo tool. I feel like I'm painting in real time. So much of composing, for me, either with pencil and paper or if I'm at the computer and it's so detailed. I heard Quincy Jones one time describe composition as painting an entire house with a Q-tip. And it really feels like that. He's just so meticulous and microscopic. But something like this with the Evo tool, you can actually perform. You can just paint and dance with it. And you're reminded again, oh, that's right, this is music. This is very inspiring. That's a good thing to have, I think, when you're in the middle of the compositional process. So back here in Evo Grid, one of the nice things in terms of inspiration is this little button right here, Feeling Lucky. So you can see that the keyboard here is mapped out with all of these different combinations of the samples that evolve. So for instance, if I'm here, that's already pretty nice. So that's just a random collection of these. And if I hit Feeling Lucky again, see how the keyboard changes? It's just a completely different collection. You can, every time, you hear the voices move differently. Some of them are that darker, warmer texture. Some of them are lighter. And then what you can do is you can go in and be much, much more specific. So with these dark prisms, for instance, even on a single pitch, And then what's nice, just like in standard view, you've got access to all of the different controls here, the tape saturation, delay, reverb, and then here too with the mic placements that you can choose whichever mic placement you want. So you can have the mics, close or a stereo pair or midsection or far away. You have such control over the Evo Grid the same way that you do in standard view. So back here in standard view, again, we can break these out by soprano, alto, tenor, bass. But if we go 2D, and let's say all the shorts here. So these are short articulations. I love this. Listen to this. Do you hear the whisper in the end of it? So it's this combined vocal technique with breath. Oh, isn't that beautiful? And then you can make it even smokier. Oh, is that nice? And then finally, we get these marcato punches and on an eh vowel, which is super handy. That's the kind of thing I would use all the time. That's more marcato O. Yeah, there's a piece right there to be born, right? And then going further into the standard view, you've got these gorgeous swells. And again, the dark versions of these. I could also see these being super useful in terms of larger sound worlds. So if you were using instruments, say a symphony, or even electronic instruments. And again, I have to just comment again on how beautifully Spitfire recorded all of this. I mean, genuinely, when I hear this back through the speakers, it sounds exactly like when I was in the room at Air. So then moving on to the all dark library. And I have to say, as a composer, this is where I tend to live, is with these dark sounds. So I want to start over here with this held smoke. So the idea is it's a combination of humming and breathing. You hear the breathing in there? Right? And this is the kind of thing, especially with the humming, the way the choir is singing so in tune, that you can really find some super dense clusters. Oh, that's I could live there all day. And you've got dark shadows. So again, just like with the light version of this, the singers are all singing a single note and then individually popping out of the texture. Same thing with clouds, but a little bit different. Yeah, and then this dark murmuring, which I also adore. Here, there's just this gentle bubbling in the sound, and again, I find this so haunting with these deep clusters. So let's say. I'm not joking when I say that sometimes I'll pull up the library and then just hit one of these clusters and just sit there for 45 seconds to a minute. It's just a complete reset on my day. And then here in the standard view, we've got breaking it down to the basses. And my God, can these basses sing? So for instance, just choosing this dark prism too, and in minor seconds, for instance. So It's really nice, and probably the way that I would tend to use that is to have a sort of tonal foundation, maybe even a minor chord, and then let that evolve. Oh, it's such a very specific, interesting emotion. And then finally, once again, the held smoke, which I find just so beautiful in the basses. And again, as I do this, so you're getting the lusciousness of humming voices. But typically, if you have six basses in your choir and you have a six voice chord, you can have one on a part. But here we've got six basses on each note, right? So that's 36 of the world's best basses, all holding this one cluster. Okay, so now we come to what is maybe my favorite part of this entire library, which is the synth engine. And this is where we get to take some of those already extreme choral sounds and then push them into a completely different world. And the layout, some of you might be familiar with. It's in Polaris, which is one of my favorite Spitfire synths. You've got these two very powerful synth engines here, and what's beautiful is you can mix between the two of them. So, for instance, if we take this patch, so there's a lot going on there, but what I can do is I can separate. That's the B engine, and then so the two synthesizers working together, you can layer them in any possible way, and then you can take each of the recordings. So, for instance, these are the organic recordings, right? The way that they existed when we first made them. So that's what we're taking it straight from the library. But then within that, there's also some really super cool warps. So, for instance, and then when you start to mix that in, it's otherworldly. Suddenly, you have access to taking the voices and combining them with these synth engines and making whole new worlds. And I'll give you an example of just a few of them here. I adore this. This is called Hilderic. Hopefully you're wearing headphones when you listen to this. It's so epic. So you can hear the original voices in there. You can hear that it's come from the singers themselves. That's where it started. But then in this case, the Spitfire producers have created these presets that are just to die for. And on top of that incredible collection of presets, we've had 3 guests come in and make a collection of presets for us. And they're so beautiful. Let's start with Caitlin Aurelia Smith, who just came up with some super cool stuff. I'll just choose one at random. Oh, that's interesting. And again, you can hear the constituents of it. And of course, as you're playing with this, you have access to all of the filters. You can change the attack, the decay, sustain, release, just like any synthesizer. Then coming down, we've also got a collection of presets made by Clark, a British producer. It's fantastic. Let's just take one here. She disappeared. It's again, it's this little world unto itself. I love that. I'm definitely going to be using some of these in my own composing. And then finally, Ryan Lott made us a collection of presets. Ryan is Well, now he's an Oscar-nominated film composer, but he's also one of 3 members of Sun Lux. I'm a massive fan of all of his music and some of the presets that he's made. So nice. I love how you can hear in each of the 3 producers that made presets for the library that you can hear their own voice in it. Like, to me, this could be the beginning of a Sun Lux song, actually. They're such exceptional artists, and I feel incredibly honored that they've made presets for this library. I know that I'm going to have the time of my life exploring not only the presets that are here and the ones made by Spitfire, but just the engine itself. I find it so powerful and so transformative. You can take that very intimate and natural sound of the human voice and just push it into the netherworld. This is a patch called Night Drive. Oh, I love that. I could hear that anywhere from a film score to a techno track. And you can take and you can affect things like pitch, for instance, in the synth. Just a little bit of wobble in there. Do the same on the other synth engine. And of course, take it so that it releases very slowly. So it can just fade to nothing. Very, very powerful. This one is called Splinter. So cool. It's nice. It's got that organic texture of the voices. One thing that I find fascinating about the human voice, and I think it's the reason that I've been drawn to it for my entire career, is that you're able to connect to an emotional color palette in a way that no other instrument can. So already cool on its own. All right, so then let's come over here. It's pretty wet, so let's take the reverb down a little bit to about here. Get that step sequencer going. Yeah, that's nice. So something. Super cool. And then we can go back with all of this, of course, and we can start playing with the filters. It's nice. Take the low pass filter, bring it down. Here's a sound called Deep Water. That's cool. Kind of alternate the steps of the sequencer. What I love is that it feels, again, alive. You can really actually perform on this. So it's less all that meticulous sequencing stuff and just letting it evolve underneath your fingers. Here's another patch by Caitlin. It's called Moving Water. Oh, man. I love that bouncing ball rhythm that it's got. That's exactly the kind of patch that would get me thinking in a completely new way. That I would play that patch and then suddenly think, oh, wait a minute. How about that can now become a motive to work with? Ooh, I like that a lot. it's, it's so cool.